It's all going in the right direction. The latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Podcast advertising continues to increase quarter-on-quarter in the US, up 2.6%, according to Magellan AI, which has released the company's Q3 22 podcast advertising benchmark report. The top 10 podcast advertisers spent $75 million, up 6% since last quarter. True crime shows carried the most ads. Overall ad time is slightly down. In New Zealand, 79% of media agencies have used podcast advertising in the last 12 months. That's a significant growth from just 60% in 2021. New Zealand media buyers are buying more podcast advertising than those in Australia, according to a study by IAB New Zealand. Changes to Twitter making you itch for somewhere else? Ariel Nissenblatt is working on a podcast community on Discord, which already has 400 people involved. We've an invite to join in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. Audible and Content is Queen have announced the return of a micro-grants programme for UK podcasters. This year, winning podcasters will be awarded £2,500 or £5,000 as a contribution to their project. Castos has built Dynamo, a free tool to help you create podcast cover art. Images are compatible with Apple's requirements. Sounder has shared a summary of the white paper the company shared with the GARM Steer Committee for review later this year. It outlines how the company applies GARM's current brand and suitability framework to audio content and the company's automated solution. Rephonic looks at podcasts which have been available since the 2000s, including Stuff You Should Know from 2008 and Gary Bembridge's Tips for Travellers from 2005. And more links in our newsletter and our show notes. Kim Fox writes about podcasting in Egypt and how feminist activism has emerged through shared stories. Nick Hilton says that the business model right now is massively in favour of the Always On podcast. And Lizzie Pollett from Acast tells us reasons why podcast advertising remains unshakable. And also in tips and tricks, which you don't normally mention, but we're going to mention today, Morning Brew's Sidekick writes how to produce a really, really good podcast. Their words, not mine, interviewing Jared Smith and Alex Laughlin. And in podcast news, True Dating Stories looks at messy, hilarious and unbelievable dating stories told by the people who live them. They're guaranteed to make you feel better about your own love life. It's from CBC Podcasts, and we thank them for their support this month. The That Peter Crouch podcast has partnered with Peloton. The show's branded segments see Peter Crouch's co-host Chris Stark immersed in the Peloton community to become as fit as a footballer. And Courtney Kosak's Private Parts Unknown has hit episode 100 and features guest Lola Jean, who's a world record holder for something, but I can't tell you what she's a world record holder in, because otherwise this podcast would get very, very dirty very, very quickly. Anyway, I can't really tell you much about the podcast either, but I can link to a press release, and that's fine for reading at work, I promise. You'll find it linked in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. Anyway, congratulations for episode 100, and bring an umbrella. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.